The Storyteller Fountain is one of the most iconic pieces of sculpture in the Birmingham metropolitan area. The placement of this piece in the city is in a location known as 5 Points South and a literal hub for the city of Birmingham. The Storyteller is viewed by people of all walks of life, never failing to invoke a response by first-time viewers. It is perhaps one of the most recognizable pieces of the Birmingham Museum of Art's public art collection. The focus of this project is to conduct interviews to find out what exactly people think of this piece, with the goal to document the various interpretations of the fountain, as well as bring a light to the history. What do you think of the fountain?
Yeah, we think the fountain's really interesting, and it's fun to have it down here, and it's lively, and the water sprays are fun and exciting for summer.
It's nice to take pictures.
A lot of creatures.
Very interesting. It was peculiar, different, and unique, basically. And I'd say it was still different, even with the animal heads and the amphibians there too. Very different, but interesting. Very interesting.
It's a charming sculpture. It's unusual. It draws you in because it is childlike and a little magical, and you don't expect to see something like this on a street corner.
One of the most important aspects of public art is to help keep people engaged and interested in their surroundings. It is used to help fight the monotony associated with modern urban life.
Well, sculpture plays a very important role because it enters our physical space in a way that a painting or a work on paper cannot. That's flat on the wall. It doesn't have any real presence in our shared environment. Sculpture does exactly the opposite. We share our environment with sculpture, and public sculpture certainly has a rich tradition in this country, going back to before the country was established in colonial days. There were certainly public monuments, sculptures of King George III in plazas in Philadelphia and New York and Boston. And then after the Republic was established, we replaced those works of art with our own heroes, often heroes on horseback. That's a very popular trope in public sculpture. But I think that certainly in the 20th and 21st century, we think more broadly about what public art can be and what public sculpture can be. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a heavy, solid, plastic monument. Sometimes a public sculpture can nowadays consist of light, or consist of music, or consist of alternating jets of water. So artists and their creative minds have taken public sculpture in directions that I don't think our early American artists would have ever dreamed of. Historically, American art is very tied to European precedent. That said, I think the one thing that really defines American art, or starts to define American art, is art in relationship to the American landscape. And certainly we see that expressed in painting, but we also see it expressed in site-specific sculpture. That when an artist considers the environment, but also considers the unique character of the place in general where the work of art is going to live. And I think in this case, relating it back to the Storyteller, I think that Frank Fleming thought a lot about what it is to live in the Deep South, and what are the experiences that Southerners have, and what are those things that unite us all. And I think storytelling is a big part of that. And so even though one might not say, oh, this relates to the American landscape, I do think in a way it does, kind of landscape in the broadest sense.
We build our world around our stories. And storytelling is actually one of those things. It's actually one of those things that's been with us. It's one of the things that makes us human. Now, our people and all people have been doing this for so long. The figures in the fountain are they don't look to me like they're meant to be terribly specific figures from particular mythologies. Although certainly the Storyteller is very Pan-like. But that might be the artist's comment on the figure of the Storyteller as archetype too. So it's like it's a great piece of art because it's one of those, you look at it, it always means something because there are deep things there that it calls to, but it's going to mean something different to different people.
It is iconic in that it reflects a sort of rebellious attitude in the city, outwardly projected against the rest of the state. At least for me, Birmingham has always been sort of like a metropolis. It's always in change, it's in flux, and the thing is that flux is still in order. In other areas, the flux is random. It comes and it goes, but that's always an active generator here. So like the Storyteller here is keeping the rest of the kingdom enthralled, not with a whip or by holding a boll weevil over everyone, terrifying them, but I always thought that it was a neat structure there.
How I feel about it, I think Frank is an incredible artist. He is probably not one of my favorite pieces of his. I don't, but it's certainly, I think it's a nice contribution to that area. I'm not interested in the whatever outside references people have made over the years. He's free to express himself any way he likes, and people can take it any way they like.
Frank was actually one of the first people I met when I came to Birmingham. Some people I met took me to a studio, and the studio in Hagood, and I just fell in love with his work. I love clay, I love ceramics, and I like the functional part of clay, but I also love the sculpture. Clay is sculpture, the whimsical pieces that Frank made. And I remember he was great. I fell in love with one of his sculptures. It was a foot that grew into a bird and a vessel, and of course it was surrounded as a bird. It had all those marvelously, intricately carved and incised feathers that he does on each and every bird. And it was just a wonderful, fanciful piece. And he let me pay for it $25 a month, as I remember, by going down to then First Alabama Bank and depositing $25 a month in the savings account. And he said, if you give me the money, it will just fly away. But if you deposit it, I won't even think about it in my savings account. So just this warm, easy person who wanted people to love his work, have it. I've been able to work on some exhibits with Frank, and then work on this fountain. Trying to raise money. Actually, I always want to try to raise money. Working with the group who's trying to raise money to put this fountain in this then empty trough here in Five Points.
You get the sense that he's got a lot going on in his head, that he has this world in a way, this world filled with sort of magical creatures swirling about in his brain, and that he feels the need to let them out and to give them shape and form.
I listened to a lot of it growing up, and I made up a lot of my own folklore, my own storytelling, but I wasn't able to tell it. I was able to entertain myself with it and imagine things, And I had a very fertile imagination as a child, because I had, I had to, I developed it, and so that's pretty much it.
When Frank was commissioned to do this piece, he thought a great deal about it, obviously, and storytelling. And animals are such an important part of who Frank is. Growing up in a rural area, Bear Creek, Alabama, in a family of, I think, 7 or 8 children.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised up in Bear Creek, Alabama, up in Marion County, near borders Mississippi and probably 4 counties down from Tennessee. And, you know, this was back in the 1940s when it was rather remote, you know. And so as a kid, I had a severe speech impediment, and I grew up mainly a mute, you know, which in the end was the best thing that could have happened to me, you know, because you didn't expel all your ideas and all this stuff, and you know, you held it. I held it inside me, you know, and I think it was probably tremendous for my creative development, you know, because instead of talking about it, I could just, you know, I just stored it away in this little locker and in this little thing, you know, like so.
Frank's work honors nature, honors animals, and I also think he often really tries to make that link between the characteristics that humans have and the characteristics that animals have, and a lot of the blending of the animal and human forms. You can look and say, well, where am I taking over and the animal is leaving, or vice versa? And so what characteristics of this animal do I actually have, and vice versa? And I think humanizing animals for whom he has a great respect, and putting us in their place, and vice versa, to really, and you can do this obviously in the land as well, how are we treating our Mother Earth in lots of cases?
Well, I grew up, you know, in a real remote section of Alabama, and nature was the only thing I could communicate with because of my speech, you know, and nature is what we had a cotton farm, corn and all that, and we worked the land for our living. We milked the cows, we killed the hogs, we can kill chickens, and we raised everything we ate and all that stuff. So you were just, you know, nature was your partner. You know, it was sometimes your God.
The fountain is memorialized to both Malcolm McRae and later Cecil Roberts. Malcolm was a local art dealer and was involved with the creation of Cobb Lane. The installment of the Storyteller piece was backed by many in the community, including the United Methodist Church of the Highlands. Cecil, a community activist and supporter of the arts, took over fundraising for the project after Jane McRae joined the Peace Corps. Cecil raised the final $35,000 needed to complete the project. The Storyteller piece was commissioned by BAA in late 1985 and dedicated on October 1991.
I really like this fountain because I really love animals, and it looks like Mr. Cecil was a humanitarian for animals, and he had a very lively spirit for children, perhaps even reading. So I think it's a really beautiful piece. Yeah, I mean, I think the turtles are the coolest. I'm a science teacher, so turtles. I'm not really sure about the scale of the other animals, and I think the goat is a little creepy. No offense, Mr. Cecil. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool fountain.
Points.
I knew Malcolm, and Malcolm's mother was a librarian. Jane McRae was a librarian at the museum, so I knew his mother well, and knew Malcolm. Malcolm had a beautiful gallery here called the Signature House. It was on 19th Street, and he really did have a great vision for what this part of our community could be, really a revitalization. It was such an active, integral, lively, vibrant part of the community early in the 20th century, and Malcolm had the vision of seeing that again. So he went to business owners. He might have organized the first business association of businesses. I'm not sure, but he was certainly active with that, wanting to see it both as a beautiful place again, as a place for retail and food, and a great place to walk, close to UAB. It just made sense to have it as a real nexus between a lot of the parts of the community.
it happened, I had a very good friend who was very active in the revitalization of 5 Points South. So anyway, his mother, knowing he and I were very good friends, she asked me to come put a tile lip around the fountain. The lip of the pool is about this wide, and she just wanted me to put a beautiful tile around it, because that's about how much memorial money she had from Malcolm, who was her son. You know, but Malcolm got murdered because he used to bring gold back from South America, and he had a fireman friend. Now, I think this is true. He had a fireman friend. I know the fireman killed him, and he took him out in Shelby County, I think, where the gold was buried, and made Malcolm show him where it was or something. I don't know, but it was not a real publicized, you know. And there were a lot of people. Some big, deep-pocketed people. They said, "We ain't gonna give no money to that queer that got killed." There's a lot of that around. Some of the big-time builders around town.
The sculpture was supported by the arts community from the get-go. It was the need for a edifice in this very prominent location as a touchstone for the community, but also as a means of helping to revitalize the 5 Points area. There was a point when this neighborhood had fallen into disrepair, and it was only through the efforts of a group of community activists that it was rejuvenated, and this was seen as a major part of that project. So I know the arts community's reaction and support for this work was staunch and strong throughout.
Malcolm McRae, his mother is a sweet, sweet woman, brilliant woman who has Alzheimer's, and it's so sad to see her went on up. But she's the one that started it. She's the one that, it was her son that got killed. And then her daughter worked for Time Life, and Time Life gave a big sum, and Bob Moody gave a big sum, and a lot of people did, you know. For instance, gave us a very big party the day we announced we were going to do it. You know, he had just opened at that time. Just opened that week or month or two, you know. So anyway, we showed those drawings. People are like, yay, you know. So, well, there was a young lady at who worked for the city in community development. Arrington was mayor then. And she got interested in this and said, let's do something more. Let's make this bigger.
From what I know is, and with this piece in particular, I know that he doesn't like to work from sketches. He really works in a more direct method of bringing his work straight from here and here to what you see in front of you. That said, with the public sculpture, obviously there are logistics involved, and because it's site specific, it needed to respond to the environment. And so I think he did work with another artist, at least to come up with some preliminary sketches.
I don't draw, so I hired a very good friend, Mason Smith, who is a master at it, to draw these sketches, you know.
Mesa, in talking with Frank about his ideas, Amasa made some initial sketches which were presented to the board of the Highlands United Methodist Church, because obviously, since this is essentially in their front yard, it was something that they needed to meet with their approval. But what I did notice from the early drawing that I saw of this, the dates, I believe, from 1984, is that the central figure wasn't originally going to be a ram. The central figure was going to be a lion.
Malcolm McRae was his name. He was a Leo. So we were going to do a fountain of a big Leo clothed lion in the center, you know. I have the drawing somewhere here of it, you know.
And he was going to be in the dead center of the fountain, quite a bit higher than the rest of the figures. And the rest of the figures, I think, were originally larger and looking up at this lion, and the idea of the lion symbolizing strength and courage.
So anyway, I started thinking over, and I didn't want to. That would probably put too much emphasis on Malcolm, because this was a city thing, and it shouldn't be Mr. Joe Blow, you know. That is Joe Blow, the lion, you know. So I changed it to anyway. When I started it, those drawings went completely out of my mind, and I had just became interested in Burr Rabbit. Someone had given me a Burr Rabbit book, which I didn't even know what Burr Rabbit was, you know. And I did a little Burr Rabbit creature for some people she worked at Southern Living, and she was stationed in Connecticut. And she gave her live-in partner a little Burr Rabbit. And it was just magic making it. It turned out so beautiful. So I wanted to recreate a big Burr Rabbit. So I did a big Burr Goat Man, you know. And I did all these animals, you know, and that's how I started thinking, you know, like, you know, and there's a very famous painting, The Peaceable Kingdom, where all the animals lay down. That's, I think Edward Higgs did some of the most famous ones, you know. So it was that theme that I liked very much, The Peaceable Kingdom. I did the dog and deer, the turtle and rabbit, some other pieces up in Cleveland, Ohio. I had a friend that had a ceramic studio up there, so I would go up there and work a month. And these pieces stayed up there, you know, because there was a foundry up there. And so the big goat man, gosh, this was 10 years later, they were still raising money trying to get this done. And I was just thinking, well, there sure went a nice dream, you know. And it got done. They raised the money. With the last money, Dr. Sam Barker, who has put a lot of pieces on campus at UAB, he was kind of supporting a sculptor named Brad Morton, who had a little primitive casting operation. And he came to me, and or to whoever was involved raising the money, and said, if Brad can cast the Ram Man, I will pay for it. So this finished it all up. So Brad works on 1st Avenue South, and his doors are open, and people can see in and see what he's doing. Well, someone had seen this goat man being done, as they said. And there was some group out in, oh God, I don't know where they were some righteous preacher out in McCalla or somewhere got wind of it. And news started spreading about this demon that I was doing, you know. So anyway, come putting it in day, here's all these righteous right-wingers with their cameras, you know, filming everything going on, you know. And then it hits the newspaper. And the plumber is blamed because he did a pentagram in the plumbing, you know, where the water runs out. It was the plumber. He did it. And Frank Fleming did the goat man. They were the, you know, all this stuff, you know, and it went every day. It got worse.
I think that there's an aspect of the peaceable kingdom, and I know that that was something that was really important to the artist when he started working on this. Even though this wasn't installed until I believe 1991, he started working on it around Christmas time of 1984. And being it was the holidays, he had a tremendous feeling of peace in his heart, and he tried to convey that in his work, that this be seen as a sort of peaceable kingdom where all creatures could live together in harmony. And that said, I think it was really shocking, some of the misinterpretations that have been applied to this work since that was the furthest thing from what Frank Fleming intended himself. This was meant to be something to bring people together in harmony, to convey a sense of peace and well-being, not anything insidious or nefarious.
I think it's great. I think it's awesome. It's kind of surprising. It's surprising that this would be in Birmingham, actually. You know, I'm a fan of Frank Fleming. Did the stuff, and I love the whimsy of it, and I love the I don't know, the whole everything about it is pretty groovy. I heard people are upset about the horns of the storyteller and stuff. Yeah, and I don't think that there's much to that. And I've also heard people say about, like, well, it's arranged in a pentagram. Well, this is 5 points, so it's an intersection that is a pentagram. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, it's the Magic City.
Right.
I mean, it's so funny because you called about Pan. We often make, you know, they call it the storyteller, but we often find humor that you have this city that has Vulcan, Pan, Electra, outbound power, 5 points everywhere. I mean, there's not just 5 points here. You have 5 points west. You can take Google shots of George Ward Park, and it's a perfect pentacle. I mean, it's just, the city is just screams magic. So while we know that the term Magic City came from the industrial boom of the steel, it definitely has a double meaning to it for us.
Here's my humble opinion on this fountain. You got a lot of crazy, like, church people who have been brainwashed to think this is a Satanist fountain. Well, it's not a Satanist fountain. If you bother to read, and a lot of people don't, read over there, it talks about this, like, I think it was some kind of woman with a lot of money, some kind of philanthropist who was a fan of perhaps the liberal arts. We all know artists were into occultism back in the day, you know, and so this artist is probably into occultism a bit, which it says nature. It talks about things of nature, which this is probably, maybe, Pan. A lot of people think it's the Baphomet. And they talk about all this Satanist stuff and the flames on the cross and Illuminati. All that's bad. I believe this is Pan. He's telling a story to nature. It's all about nature and the relationship. But if you notice, the frogs here are aligned in the position of a 5-pointed star. But, you know, it's all about maybe human beings stretched out like Michelangelo's, right? A human being with his arms and legs and his head attached. Basically, it's about how everything connects in this circle. Nature, we're all interconnected. This animal is just telling you the story to the other animals. It's like, it's basically Pan. That's who this is. This is Pan. That's what I believe. But a lot of people want to say it's the Baphomet and Satanism and all that stuff. I hear they bitched a fit when they built it across from Brother Brian.
Pan's Greek. And Pan comes in many different shapes. You'll see like a young Pan, and you'll actually see a lot of artwork around people's homes. You'll see the little satyr with the goat legs and little bitty buds playing the flute. Pan.
The name means all.
Yeah.
Pan is the god of nature. And actually the aspects he was talking about are ways in which Pan manifests. You know, we get our word panic from a sudden fear coming on you when you're out in the wilderness. Total unreasoning existential dread that just slaps you from behind. It's called panic, after the great god Pan. You know, not that Pan intends to, you know, cause us issues or whatever, but that we are sometimes not open enough to him, and it results in a certain amount of fear of the unknown. And you know, when you come down from that fear, it's like, oh, well, there wasn't really anything specific to be afraid of. It's just, I'm part of that. What was I doing being afraid?
Old as I am, it's not all that important. But you ask about the fountain. The fountain seems very demonic to me. Because Vulcan is the top of a pentagram. So we're just not looking at what the real meanings are. Granted, it is an attraction to this area. But do we want the kind of people that demonic things bring? I'd rather see us have something that it was more suitable to bringing in good life, not bad. That's about all I've got to say. Thank you.
I think people will come and look at this sculpture in different ways. Over time, it has been interpreted in ways that I don't think Frank intended, in terms of a religious message or anti-religious message, which was certainly not his intention, but we're all going to do it.
It was really a handful of people, I would say the tiny fractional minority of individuals who started to apply wild interpretations and really misinterpretations to this work, and you know, thinking that the ram was in fact a goat and it was a symbol of Satan, and that the placement of the frogs represented a pentagram and the 5 points, and
he's a ram because his horns are rounded. He's not a goat, his horns would, you know, stick up like the devil or something, you know, whatever, you know. So anyway, this was confusing to a lot of people. Most people said he was a goat, you know, and these Bible belters, you know.
I love this fountain. Like when I was a child, my mom did a political thing right here when she wanted to be a politician, and then she chose not to be. And I just played in the fountain the whole time. Favorite fountain. And I moved down here, and I used to hang out around here because I go to UAB, and I just like this fountain. And so I've actually had people there who look satanic, and I'm like, no, you're just uneducated because you don't understand what it is.
And calling satanic is so ignorant. It really is.
All right. Well, first of all, define Satanism. Satanism don't believe in Satan. So if you go to a Satanist and go, hey, do you believe in the devil? They're going to say, no. They don't look at, even for example, you know, in Oklahoma, the Satanists of New York are putting up a Baphomet, or you know, pursuing to put up a big statue because you have 10 Commandments. Well, we can have ours too, which I think is awesome. But they don't believe in the devil. The Satanists believe in themselves. Their most holy day is their own birthday. So it's not, you know. So when people go, "Oh, they're satanic," you really probably don't have a clue what you're saying. You're coming from a very one-sided ideology that says this, but if you actually talk to a Satanist, they're going to go, no. Now, Luciferians, it's a different story. And they follow Lucifer, which is an archangel, which was the right hand of God, not the devil. Very few people, especially in this community, or actually across the board, worldwide, actually believe in the devil or follow the devil.
Anyway, it lasted for about 2 weeks. Every fucking day, they would come up with something. These mothers would write in and tell what horrible dreams her daughter had from seeing the goat man. And they said, there's a kudzu tree coming down Red Mountain that looks like the goat man. Is it the goat man? And they were just blaming everything on the poor old goat man, and of course my name wasn't left off either, But 2 weeks later, football season starts. It's dropped. Never hear anything about it again. But thousands more people saw the piece because of all the crap they raised about it. Because they could have done so much worse. They could have said nothing, But they raised so much hell. I've got a folder this thick of shit that they tried to put out. That they did put out in the papers. Every paper, And finally, we had a very good, brilliant art critic at that time. And he, one Sunday, spent the whole segment on the fountain and traced it back to mythological times and all this, and he gave it a lot of credence, So anyway, but that Christmas, I made a shit pot full of money. That fountain, them raising hell, did more for my career than anything, all combined. People said, how did you get all that publicity? What did you do? I said, nothing, I just worked, But it was the greatest publicity I could have ever had. And it was the scariest thing I ever faced. It really did scare me. I mean, it never occurred to me one bit while I was doing this as to what might cross the people's mind.
I do think that people can interpret the sculpture in many different ways, which I think is the great thing about art. I think that it can humanize a space, it can open a space, it can encourage reflection, encourage people to see the world differently. And I think in this case, people will come and look at the sculpture in different ways.
You could do that with anything. I mean, some misguided individual could look at the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. and say that it's about Martians. That's a misinformed and actually completely outlandish reading of something. We know what that work is about, and if you stop to think about what this work, it's got a title. It's Storyteller. The artist is telling you what this work is about, and for anyone who grew up in the Deep South or even has come to the Deep South and adopted it as their own, it doesn't take much to realize that this is precisely about storytelling. It's about oral tradition, even without the title.
I have to say that they have their rights, really. Just as much as I have my rights to think, on the other end, they have just as much right. Yeah, I really believe that. Whatever it is, however awful it might be, that is their right. And I believe in freedom. I really do. I believe in freedom of word and freedom of thought and all this kind of stuff. I really am a strong believer in that. That's more important than they said what, because when you argue with them or something like that, that just gives them credence. You're paying that much attention to what the idiots are saying.
And so I think that this small minority of individuals made a lot of noise, and I think that there were perhaps one or two journalists that thought, well, this might make a good story. But fortunately, there were a number of journalists and arts critics who said, wait a minute. Enough is enough. Let's call it like it is. And this isn't about anything more than storytelling in a beautiful fairy tale world, and it's meant to have a peaceful and benevolent message and nothing else.
The book that the ram is reading is intentionally left blank. By keeping it open, The work tries not to exclude anybody from engaging and interjecting their own personal narrative. Storytelling and narrative serve as the glue to connect us all. It gives a way to come together and feel a sense of commonality.